Hey guys, alright, so the final video for this lesson is editing. Now I'm going to cover a couple of things, even though editing is rather simple. We're going to cover, first of all, sourcing royalty-free and even possibly cost-free tracks off the internet, and then opening up Premiere to import your PNG sequences and just do a basic edit. This is basically everything you need to know to create your 1 to 2 minute piece on your interior space. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. I'm going to first introduce you to SoundCloud. SoundCloud is a website where you can actually source royalty-free music, and there's a fairly simple way to search for it. Now, SoundCloud isn't the most user-friendly when it comes to downloading stuff. But you can make a free account. You can even sign in with a Facebook. It's not that hard. I've got my account open here. And the first thing I'm going to punch in is royalty-free music. Okay, and you can go instrumental if you want to. I'm just going to go with royalty-free music. And I'm going to go with tracks here. Now, there's one more thing I'm going to do, and that is here under filter results. I can make a filter by any length or added by any time, but to listen to, you've got these options. Now, to listen to means you can listen to commercial tracks, but these are not legally usable. To share, again, you can share them, but you can't use them in anything. To use commercially is possibly the first port of call. These you can use, but you can't edit them, and so that means that you can't sort of remix them in any way. So the safest one to usually go for, if you really, want to be absolutely 100% sure, is to modify commercially. This will include things like trimming, mixing with other clips, that sort of stuff. Now, you can go ahead and, further filter by tag, ambient, electro, cinematic, that sort of stuff. But generally, going through them, you find some tracks that, start to stand out for you, depending on what you want to get across. Now, of course, corporate type of tracks have a particular look, and so maybe you want to go royalty-free music corporate or something like that. I tend to like ambient or electronic or cinematic ones. Here's one that I found, which is kind of cool. And you can just sort of click and sort of preview the track that way. Now, downloading a track off SoundCloud, there's a couple of ways to do it. Now, if you've got something like this that says free download, what that's going to do is actually take you to the website, and you may have to sign up to that website to get that track, okay? But if it doesn't say free download, but it has more underneath it, and you click on it, and it's got a download button, this is what you're looking for. And when you just go download this track, you can download directly from SoundCloud. So we can see here in my browser, it's downloading. In a few seconds, it'll be mine. And you can go through and sort of preview a number of tracks. And it's probably a good idea to start building a library of various tracks for you to use. All right, that's SoundCloud out of the way. Let's hide that down. And I'm going to go to my downloads here, and I'm going to grab the last tracks that I downloaded and put them in a folder called Audio for SoundCloud that I've had open here. Okay, so that's SoundCloud in a nutshell. The next thing we're going to do is open up Premiere. Now, you guys cloud, and so it's probably a good idea to download a copy of Premiere. I'm going to be using the vanilla flavor of Premiere so that all the shortcut keys would be inside of Premiere. I'll admit to you that I came from a Final Cut background, and so my personal preference is to use the Final Cut Pro shortcut keys, even though Final Cut Pro has gone in some weird directions and Premiere is kind of the industry standard now. And so if I fumble a little bit, I do apologize. But the first thing we're going to do, we've opened up Premiere, we go New Project. Browse to where you want to put that particular project. Okay, I'm going to choose this exercises folder, and I'm going to call this interiors. And all the other settings are fine. They're just things to do with scratch disk, which same as project is fine, unless you're running low on space and you've got an external hard drive. You just want to go and change all of those, browse to your external hard drive instead of having the same as project, which will be the hard drive that you're using. HDV capture, we don't really need to worry about that or any of the others. They're all fine. This project already, yep, I know, I sort of did a bit of a practice run. All right, so the default version of, let me just see here. Yeah, the default version, let's just get some brightness up. Okay, we've got brightness. There we go. Okay. The default version of Premiere is set out in this way. You've got a source clip window, a program clip window, a timeline, and a bin that's also split up into a number of ways. Now, if you don't like this configuration, it's very, very simple to shuffle screens around, just like we sort of do in Blender. And under Window, under Workspaces, you'll see that there's a bunch of them. Now, I have my own personal preference that I've already called Paul Edit, but I'm going to use this vanilla layout under Edit, just so that you guys don't get confused. If it opens up different, we don't sort of freak out. And the first thing I'm going to do is go up to my Premiere settings under Preferences, under Media, and take a look at what the media time base is. Now, we want to make sure that that's at 25 frames a second. Premiere, because its parent company, Adobe, is in the United States, it will default to something like 29.97 for NTSC or that sort of thing. But we don't want any of that. So we're just going to make sure that we have to change that over to 25. It's also important when you import media like a PNG sequence, it will import to that sequence setting. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I can go to File, Import, and I'm going to navigate to the folder, in this case it's ArtSpace, where we rendered out our clips from before. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go Camera 1, 001, that's the file. If it's not ticked already, you see that it'll automatically recognize it's an image sequence, and so you tick image sequence, and when you import, it will import. If we double click on this, you'll see that the source clip here will import the image sequence, which is a lovely video. Okay, so this is the render that we imported. So we're going to do it another way. We're going to go here to our Project Interiors bin, and we're going to right click, import, and I'm going to scroll down to the first frame of camera 2. I do the first frame because sometimes clicking other frames kind of confuses it and will only take it from that frame, but we want 201, that's the first one. Again, image sequence is ticked, import. Now, to make things a little bit more interesting, I've got a couple of other renders that I'd done from another set that I'm going to import as well. And you'll notice as I import that the frame rate is importing at 25. Now, if it was defaulted, it would import it at a different frame rate. And even though these PNG sequences are one frame after the other, and you should be able to edit a time base at some point, okay, that frame rate can sort of mess things up. All right, so the next thing I want to do is I want to create a sequence. So I like to neaten things up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this folder here, and I'm going to call this footage. You can call it clips or whatever you like. Oh no, it relabeled that. And I'm going to grab those and I'm going to move them into the footage folder. There we go. I'm going to make another folder called Edits. And under Edits, that's where I'm going to click my new item and I'm going to create a sequence. I want my sequence settings to be, HD, and so this is a fairly good one, HDV 1080p 25. Even though my clips aren't that, yours should be. You can find another one if that doesn't suit, or create your own by going into settings, and you can create like a square pixel version or something like that. But this one should do me just fine. And I'm going to OK that, and that creates a sequence. Okay, and we're going to call this Interiors Presentation. It's a good idea to get labeling from the get-go because when you get to rendering, it will take on the name of whatever sequence that you're creating. The next thing I want to do is I want to begin to populate this timeline with my renders, and I can drag those renders over and just drop them there. Now you'll get this warning, clip mismatch warning, if you have rendered something other than what that sequence setting is. And I have. They're quite small. They're at like half res. And you have two choices. You can keep the existing settings, or you can change the sequence settings. Changing the sequence settings will create a sequence based on your media. And so all of the frame rate and the frame size and all of that will reflect what you rendered out of Blender. Now, this could be good if you've rendered at 100% HD square pixel. Okay, you might want to do this. But for me, I want to keep existing settings because I've got a smaller frame size and I need to enlarge this. And I do want to create an HD project. All right, now this is quite small, so I'm going to zoom in. I can actually hit the Z key and click zoom. And then I can hit my V key to go back to the selection mode. I can select the rest of the multiple clips and I can drag and drop them into this timeline, okay? And then down here on this timeline, you've actually got these two nodes, and if I click that, it can actually zoom out to show the entire sequence, which is about a little over 35 seconds long. Now you'll notice that they have imported and they're quite small. And so the first thing I want to do is to scale them up. This is just an optional thing for me. And so if I right click on this clip and I go down and I go scale to frame size, it scales it up. And I want to do that for each of them. I can multiply select them and scale to frame size to get them both or all. And now this should give us a sequence which, when playing, should create what we want to look at. So we've got our interior, and that's looking quite nice. And we've got another interior here. That's the other render that goes around the room. And then here's a couple that you haven't seen yet. These are some interiors from a set that I created years ago that I thought would be nice. Oh, look, this looks like there's a bit of a clipping area over here, but not to worry. This is sort of like a hospital, a modern sci-fi, Star Trek-y hospital type thing. And I rendered these out just to give it a bit more content that we can go ahead and edit. So now that we've got our clips on our timeline, we've got the beginnings of an edit. The next thing we have to do is import some music. And so I generally like to do a bit of a preview to listen to, what kind of mood this might end up being. So let's have a quick listen to some. That could be cool. An hour of infinite space yoga. I don't think so. That sounds kind of corporate-y. Okay. Very epic. Yeah, maybe not. And 27 minutes of boring. I think I'm going to go with this 30-second track just because it's probably the right length for this. And I'm just going to drag it down onto my project folder. And now if you're going to use more than one track, it's probably good to make yourself an audio bin and put that in there. And then all you got to do is drag that onto your timeline and it will fit in the audio track. And when we preview it, and that's kind of cool. Let's turn that down a little bit. Yeah, okay, so look, we'll go with that for now. Okay, so I'm going to just trim that down. And the first thing I'm going to do is, teach you about some of the functions here of Premiere and editing in general. So the first thing, of course, is that we want to be able to trim and edit tracks. Now, there's two ways of doing it. One is you can grab a handle at the end of any clip or between clips and just drag them along, and you should be able to shorten or lengthen a track. But what if you want to get really specific? So let's say we went to, I'm just going to mute this for a second by hitting the M here. Let's say I wanted to go, okay, we get to round about there and just before the end. Now I could drag back, and by default it should snap to that playhead to get that clip to finish there before starting the next one, and I can just drag that over, or I can do something called a split, which or a cut. And so the default for Premiere is C, and it gives you a little blade tool there. And so if I click on that, and I go back to my V key for select, I can select that and delete it. There's another way of deleting it called ripple delete, and that is if I click on that space there. I don't think it'll work because of the audio. Oh, it will. Sorry, it's per track. It can actually delete the space between clips. And so little by little, you can go ahead and go, okay, there's that. And I want to start this one about there. And so I might do a trim there, click in that space, delete. And that should have a nice round. And before I get to that horrible black window, I'm going to C key, clip, I want V, delete that space before we get into this hallway shot. And finally, there's an overwrite function. So if I grab that clip and pull it towards the playhead, it'll actually trim for you by overlaying all of those frames. Now this, editing in Premiere is non-destructive, which means let's give ourselves a nice 20-second. Let's go for about 20 seconds there, which means that at any point, if I've trimmed something, let's take this out of. I'm going to double click on this clip so you can actually see here on the timeline, right? It doesn't actually show it. It only shows us the trimmed section, right? But if I was to put this on a different timeline and grab a handle there, I can actually reclaim some of those frames. They sort of still exist there, as it were. And this is actually quite good, especially if we want to do things like, I'm just going to trim that there, delete, go to 20 seconds and just do that. I'm going to C key my audio. There we go. And I want to zoom everything so I can see it all. That's good. Okay, so if you've trimmed up your clips, and they're quite nice, and they're working with the music and everything, but you want to sort of adjust and edit. Okay, I'm going to zoom in here using my pinch tool on my keypad, but you can also hit the Z key and zoom in that way. And so I see that there's a beat of music here, for instance. You can do what's called a roll edit. Now, all of these functions are here in this toolbox, and so I can go rolling edit. You can see that the rolling edit tool is N for some reason. If I move my mouse down to that split, and there's frames that exist on this side of this clip, and there's frames that exist on this side of this clip, I can actually roll that edit over. And what it does is it basically brings in more of these frames and deletes some of these frames, okay? There's another type of edit, and that is called a slide edit. And I'm going to do that with this particular clip at the back. And a slide edit means that you want to keep this range, okay? It fits really well with the music, okay? It works on the beat and everything like that, but you just don't like the frame that it enters it on. So with a slide edit, where's our slide? There it is, slip tool, sorry. What that does is it actually does sort of like a pan behind. And so you can see my little numbers are clicking there. I can actually, if you can imagine that range is a window, and I'm actually pulling the clip back and forward behind that window, right? And I can sort of slip that down a few frames. And so that it actually begins, if I go ahead, and I don't know why it zooms in, that's the frame that it begins in, okay? That is another way of editing. So you can actually slip the clip inside of that edit, right? So yeah, you've got some really cool tools in Premiere just for some basic editing. And I wouldn't really expect you to go, well, you don't really need to go beyond too much of that, but there might be something like a transition that you want to add. Transitions are very easy to add. You have, let's see here, do we have, is it library? Effects, okay. I really don't like this panel structure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my effects tab, and I'm going to grab it from here. I'm going to drag it up here, just like in After Effects. You can place it on a section of a window, and if I put it on the side there, it'll actually make another window here. I prefer to have my bin here, so I'm actually going to grab this project and I'm going to put it in the center there. So I'm also just going to swap those around. Okay. Because I don't really need any of these other ones, I can actually close all of these panels here. Don't really need that, don't really need that, and don't really need that. And so what I've just done is put my projects and effects up on this side. I've got my timeline that's nice and large down here. And I've got my two windows. I've got my source window, which is if you double click on a clip, it will show you the source. And this is the project timeline window, which shows you the edit. All right, so over here in effects, I'm going to go down and going to go, okay, video transitions. And I've got a bunch of them, okay? I prefer my dissolves, and by default, you see this little one with the blue square? That cross dissolve, which can be changed in your preferences, that cross dissolve is your default. And so if I came here to a particular split, let's say, and I went right click, apply default transition, a cross dissolve appears. And you can actually see it by scrubbing the playhead. There's your nice cross dissolve, okay? But what if I wanted something a little bit more, I don't know, sexy? I can go and see, all right, what have we got here? We've got a slide, we've got a wipe. Wipes are pretty good, you know, something like a Star Wars wipe, okay? I click on that, and I can take a look at the default, and the default is wiping left to right. Now, I can sort of leave my playhead somewhere there, and I can double click on this wipe, and it should bring up effects controls. If it doesn't, you click once and go over to the effects controls panels, which is behind this source clip panel. And by double clicking, you usually get that transition time. You can change things about it, such as the duration. Let's make it just 1 second. The alignment. You can actually have the wipe start at a cut, or end at a cut, or center at the cut, which means that's where the transition sort of crosses over. You can show the actual sources, and so you can actually see. And you can even do things like start a transition sort of midway. And so as the transition begins, that's where it would begin. But it's generally a good idea to have it start at 0 and end at 100. You can also do things like on this particular transition, and you'll have different options for different transitions, but you can have something like a border width. Okay, so if we were to take a look here, I've moved my playhead to somewhere in between. Okay, there's a border, and you can actually have a border there, and I can sort of like increase the border. I can change the border color. Okay, I can reverse it. I can do all sorts of things like that. And so that's one transition that I've put in with a nice border. I might reduce that border to about 5, and that sort of makes it a nice wipe transition left to right. Okay. All transitions are applied in the same way. And so if we went to, say, 3D motion and wanted to do like a cube spin, you can drag and drop that transition onto an edit. Okay. And some need to be rendered, but this cube spin here, again, I can click on that, and in my effects panel, I've got a few other, let's see, we've got some other object options, or maybe a few less actually, such as, you know, changing the time, showing the actual sources, reversing it, and so that reversing it actually makes it go the other way. Okay, this is probably not a great one to use on something that's spinning inside a cube, which the room is, because it kind of distorts it, and yeah, it kind of makes me look, yeah, it sounds a bit funny. Anyway, you can delete a transition by clicking on it and just hitting delete, and so on. And that's basically all there is to transitions. Now, there is one final thing that you'll want to do to sort of pretty up your edit, and that is to include titles. Now, this could be as simple as like an intro title board, you know, sort of like begins the edit, or things that will actually sort of be put over the top. So if you've got to say a render of your particular object that you've done 360 around or something like that, you might want to put a tag there. And I'm going to show you how to do titles for both. Now, titling in Premiere is fairly simple. You just go to the title menu and you go New Title, and we can start with a default still. Okay, we want the width and the height to be the size of our frame, time base and all of that. And title one's fine. We can call this intro if you wanted to, because I'm going to start with my intro title. And as soon as we do that, we get our title dialog box floating above Premiere. Okay. We also get something else, which I'll show you in a second, and it's a good idea to organize your title. And I'm going to show you the one drawback of titling in Premiere, which is a little bit more user-friendly in other programs, but we're going to bear with it. Now, the first thing it does is it shows you the frame that we're over, okay? And so look, we'll just go with that for now. But what we want to do, actually, you know what? How do we... Let's take the background video off just to not be distracted, okay? This is sort of like Photoshop, okay? So you've got your type tool, you've got all these other things. You actually draw things on there, but if you want, you can choose a preset title style from one of these. And so let's say we wanted to, look, impact regular or even Arial black. That could be quite nice, and that changes the font there, okay? We can go ahead and change our font before we begin to type. Just looking for the... Where... You know what? Let's just start typing and then we'll get into that. Ah, yes. So as soon as you start typing, that's when you can change your font families and everything. And so I'm going to call this Interior Showcase, let's say. I'm going to select all and I'm going to align this center. Now, there's a couple of things that you can do to center this perfectly instead of trying to drag and drop them. There's a center tool here where you can click vertical center and horizontal center, and it will center it perfectly in the center of the screen. I'm going to scroll my font size up a little bit, so it's, let's say, about 180. That will work quite nicely. Center this again. What do we got here? There we go. It's nicely centered. Now, once we've got some text on there, then you can go in and change things like its opacity, its position, all that sort of stuff, including the fonts. So if you wanted something a little bit more fancy, maybe comic type of font, if you've got it, or something horror inspired. It depends on what you actually have created. You can go ahead and change the fonts much like you would in Photoshop. Okay, I'm going to go with, I think I might go with this. Look, it's really not important. And I'm just going to shrink this down a little bit more. And this will be my first title. Okay. Now I can close this down at any time. There are a bunch of properties here. You can go ahead and change the color. You can change the shadow. You can change even a background plate and all that sort of stuff. But I'll let you play around with it. I'm just going to make a nice basic title in a nice font. So if I shut this down here and go into my projects, I've had this folder selected. So my title has automatically gone into this folder. But what I want to do is I want to create a titles folder, and I want to move that into my titles folder. Now, it doesn't create it where you had your playhead, okay? So I'm going to select everything by hitting my A key. This gives me a double arrow, and then I can move this over. It's going to move this up because I believe that the title has a particular time frame. I think it's about 4 or 5 seconds by default. And so I'm going to bring this down there onto my timeline. I want it on a black background. I might put this on video track 2. Okay, I like to organize my videos with generally video 1 and 2 to do like overlay edits, and then track 3 for titles and special effects and stuff. But in this case, I've only got a 1 track of video, so I'm going to put this up here. The reason being is sometimes you might want to have this dissolve over footage or stuff like that. Now I want my audio to begin under my title, so I'm going to grab that just by clicking and dragging, and I want to have a quick listen to this. And that would be a good place to stop, so I stop my playhead, I drag this back, I go right-click, apply default transition to get a cross dissolve, and I'm just going to play that again. That's a bit of a long dissolve, so I'm going to double-click on that and make it maybe 18 frames, okay? So let's see. That's much nicer. Now, with my A key, I have this double-headed arrow. If I have this, I can actually select everything which is right of those two arrows. But if I hold down Shift, it gives me one arrow, which means I can select just one track. And that means, let's try this again. One track, I have to hold down Shift, and then I bring that track over. And then I'm going to right-click there, apply transition, double-click, and I might give this 12 frames. So now what we've got is a fade in, a fade out and fade in. And it's starting to look like a really nice edit already, which is not bad, considering that I've done this for about 10 years. Okay, so I'm just going to stretch out that music there. So that's a title there. Now, you might be tempted to create a new title by double-clicking on that and editing it, but what you're actually doing is editing that title, okay? So what you want to do is you want to duplicate it inside your bin. So I'm going to go right-click, duplicate, and I'm going to call this lower third 01, because there might be more than one lower third. I'm going to move this down onto where I want it, which is here. Okay, so right now it's looking like a bit of a 90s show. We don't want that. But by double-clicking on it, now I do want to see my background, and so I'm going to click on Show Background Image, and this will allow me to position this by grabbing it inside this inside line here. Now, these two lines are called safe areas. They come from a background in video where your cathode ray tube TVs or monitors would cut off certain amounts of your image just because of the bend in the screen. But these are a really good indicator of where you should probably place your text, and any important action shouldn't really go beyond this line here. So I'm going to put this inside my title safe. I'm going to align this left. I'm going to change the color. I think I want something dark because it's quite a light scene. That looks a lot better. You can sort of see it updating behind here. I'm also going to reduce the size of that. I'm going to bring this down, and by double clicking on it, I'm going to select all. I can begin to hospital hallway, and I can call that something like that. And I can change things like the leading. Let's try doing is it this leading here? Is this where it is? Yes, it is. Okay, let's give this a little bit more leading. I might shrink this down a little bit, because what I might want to do actually is something like this. I'm going to go set 2: there we go. And I want this to be slightly larger. So I can, come on, give me the double-headed arrows. Set 2. So let's say we were going to do this. I'm going to just select those ones and make that 50. There we go. And just with my arrow there, I can just grab that. And I've got a nice lower third. Okay. Now this is probably a really good idea to have this fade up. So there we give it a few seconds and start there. Now instead of adding the dissolve, I'm going to copy a dissolve. I'm going to click on that. I'm going to go Control or Command C, and over here Control or Command V should paste it. Right, you have to have that selected there. And that can actually paste transition. And I'm going to have it fade out there by going Command V again. It'll also paste a transition on the end of a clip. Okay. So the next thing I want to do is I want to duplicate this again. Now I really should have called these different in reverse. This lower third, and I'm going to call this set one house. Let's undo that. Because it starts with H, I can continue. House. There we go. There we go. All right, and I'm going to move that one down onto here. So we get this. And we need to select right there. And I'm going to Control V. And I'm going to go Control V there. And now I've got a nice little edit for my interior showcase. And some funky music. It fades up and we get a nice title there. There's a wipe. And we can probably go and put some more transitions in there if we wanted to. Okay. But you can sort of see where the edit is going. Okay. Now we can always put in another dissolve on audio as well, and we can even stretch this out. You see, you can sort of stretch this out to, you can see the duration is rolling along there to maybe 3 seconds. I can put in another default transition there of 12 frames, and now we've got a nice fade out. Okay, and it ends. Okay, and so that's basically all you need to know to edit. We've imported some clips, we've moved some windows around, we've even seen our effects, which, yes, you can take a look at some video effects and drag them onto clips if you want to. We've added some transitions, we've added some titles, and we've added titles to our edit. The next thing we do is export. So happy with that, we go File, Export Media. Now, a good export setting for your assessments would be H.264 match source medium bitrate. I do this because this little 25-second clip, the estimated file size is about 9 meg. I don't need it in full HD if you didn't want to do that. And the smaller the frame size, the smaller the file size as well, because it will render out less information. You'll see that my output name matches my my sequence name, interiors presentation, which is fine. If it doesn't, you click on that because we do need to actually go to renders here, okay, and save it. Right, so tell it where to go. But you've got some other options in format. If you wanted to, you could render out something. H.264 is pretty good, but matching source, let's say you want to put it up on YouTube, you can go and get yourself a YouTube 720p setting. Okay, you can see that it's a fairly large file size, 47 meg. The good thing about YouTube is that you want to export the largest possible file because it renders for free a bunch of smaller files for different devices. But it all depends on the largest file size. Of course, this is a much higher setting than our medium bitrate, which I kind of thought might be better because it's a nice smaller size. You can also change audio settings. You know, sample rates 48,000, bitrate 192, AAC because I'm on a Mac, which is fine. You might have some different audio formats like AIFF or WAV or whatever. Find one, play it. I should be able to hear it, but generally these default settings are fine. Now, you can just click export because you've got one clip, but let's say you wanted to do multiple clips. You can actually hit Q, which would open up this little program here. It exports data. It opens up Media Encoder, which actually gives you a few more settings to play with. By queuing it, there it is, queued, it's ready, okay? You can actually change the format, or if you wanted to, you could right-click, duplicate a couple of times, and try rendering out some different ones. So let's say the MPEG for a phone or something like that, or a TIFF sequence if you needed to. Or let's look at QuickTime here, what we've got. Match source. This is for video, obviously, and so on, right? So there's that. That's really, really handy as well. You can queue that up. And the good thing about Media Encoder is you can hit play, go back to Premiere and do another edit as that's playing. And then once you're done with that, you can go to File, Export, and queue that up again, and it will just add to the render queue. This is really good for one of those set and forget type things where you've got a bunch of stuff to render out. So that's a good one to keep in mind, but we won't use that for today. All right, so I'm just going to go Export, Media, Match Source Medium Bitrate. That's good because it's a nice file size, and hit Export because I know where it's going, okay? And my video should begin to export. Because it's only 25 seconds long, it doesn't have a great deal of stuff going on. It renders pretty fast. Again, your mileage may vary. And once that's done, go and take a look. Where are we? Documents. There's renders. No, that's a different one. And there is my finished video. There's previewing. It's looking quite nice. You can see that this compression setting isn't that bad. Okay, I got a bit of glitching here, but that's because of my render. And here's my hospital hallway. Okay, and that's about all there is to do for editing. So the next thing that you guys should be doing is creating your 1 to 2 minute piece like this, exporting it out of Premiere, and uploading it to where you've got to upload. So thanks for watching, you guys, for all of these videos. I hope they have been a good set of videos that supplement the course material, and I hope you've really enjoyed this course.